Hi everyone, welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige. Welcome back to solo episodes. I'm very excited to be doing one of these again, although it is going to be a little bit more of a hot mess kind of episode just because I've taken a month off now from doing solo episodes and there's just so much that happened in the month of November, so we're gonna blow through a lot of these really quickly, and unfortunately I'm gonna leave it on you guys to go and do the research to find out more about these stories. But I hope you guys enjoyed Illinois Candidate Month. That was a lot of fun for me, very exciting for me, and January, we are going to be doing Candidate Month again, but this time with candidates from all over the country. We have one from Nebraska, one from New York, one from Illinois, and one from Michigan. So that should be very fun and exciting, and I'm very excited to be, expanding my reach beyond Illinois candidates, and I'm so excited for January to come up. But otherwise, I hope you guys are doing well. I had a hell of a month of November, and I'm incredibly thankful that I chose to use that as candidate month, because I did end up, so the whole reason that I organized candidate month is because I was going to be traveling a lot in the month of November, and so I did that to kind of keep the stress off of me while I was gone and didn't bring my computer with me. I was supposed to go to Jamaica at the beginning of November. Hurricane Melissa happened. I can't go. And then on one of those days that I was supposed to be in Jamaica but was not, we got the first snowstorm in Chicago. I totaled my car, got a concussion, and then was decrepit and out of commission for a week, and then didn't have a car for a few more days after that. Got a new car, then I went to New York, and then it was Thanksgiving, and then I went to Iceland, which, by the way, very, very fun. And I'm not a cold weather person, but I would highly recommend going to Iceland in the winter time. We were able to see the Northern Lights, which was so awesome and so fun. But I had a good November. Hopefully yours was better than mine. And yeah, I'm excited to come back to some solo episodes. And yeah, if you guys know of any candidates that you would like me to have on, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. I'm happy to have a plethora of candidates on, and it's been very fun to see what this batch of candidates has to say. Or if you don't know a candidate but know somebody that has a cool job or a good take on something, that's also a fine guest. And I'm kind of looking forward to going back to regular everyday guests once primary season kind of starts to slow down. Anyways, let's get into today's stories. Starting out strong, we're going to talk about Kash Patel, the FBI director, who is in some hot water over private jet use. This story has kind of evolved over the last few weeks. It started as he's taken, I think, between 12 to 15 personal trips, which if you are the FBI director, you must travel on the FBI provided jet because it has secure communication lines. It came out that some of these trips seemed a little bit unnecessary. For starters, flying his girlfriend to a UFC fight so she could sing, taking a flight to the Boondoggle Ranch, which is some hunting ranch out in Texas. These weren't very necessary trips, and nothing really has come of this. It's more Kash Patel just trying to defend himself from it. But all I'm going to say is that he's had this job since January, so he's got, 11 months on the job. I have not taken 12 to 15 personal trips in the last 11 months, and I do have a boyfriend that lives away from where I live, so if I can resist the urge to take 12 to 15 personal trips to see him, I'm just not sure why the FBI director can't also give us the same courtesy. Because keep in mind, for these flights, all he has to do is pay the government the cost of what a regular flight ticket would be. So that means that when he's flying from DC to the Boondoggle Ranch in Texas, he's only paying the cost of a commercial ticket. So he's paying, $300? If you're flying United or American Airlines, he's paying $300 to fly from DC to the Boondoggle Ranch in Texas on a private jet, which is insane. The story is starting to fizzle out, so I don't expect much to come back out about this, but nonetheless, something to keep your eyes on. Now, the next one is one that I couldn't wait to gap about when news broke on this, but Trump has demolished the East Wing in order to build a massive ballroom, and this this is the good part about waiting a month to be able to record a solo episode, because this whole saga has been insane. So first, Trump had always said, like, you know, we're gonna build things. He had at first said, we're not going to touch anything on the White House. Like, it's just going to be like an extension of the White House. Surprise, surprise, they demolished the East Wing. Now, it is being paid for by private donors, by, you know, pick your favorite villain, and they've donated money to pick your favorite technocrat, and they've donated money to completing this project. So the argument from a lot of conservatives is like, oh, it's not being paid for by taxpayers, da 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 da. Okay, so that is destroying history. That's my issue with it personally, is that you are destroying history and like things that cannot be replicated. Like I saw a story from, I think it was a reporter, but the day the Obamas allowed cameras in the East Wing, and that's like the tourable part of the White House, and now it literally just does not exist anymore. Not to mention the like glaringly obvious comparison of Marie Antoinette of people are literally struggling to pay their bills, struggling to, you know, get what they need, get their necessities, and Donald Trump is building a 90,000 square foot ballroom for what? But continuing off of that, it initially had a announced cost of $200 million, but very quickly that number ballooned to $300 million. So that's like really great and awesome. Then there were also the comparisons of Hitler's bunker and how Hitler had kind of done the same thing where he built a ballroom and there was a big old bunker underneath it. So don't know about that. Then the initial builder that Trump was using Trump has kept like expanding the size of how big this ballroom is supposed to be. And the original builder kind of put his foot down and said, hey dude, like this is going to dwarf the size of the White House and the West Wing. Like, can we have a discussion about perhaps making it a little smaller? And Trump said no, and he quit. So I guess that was the only good guy putting up a fight against the ballroom. But yeah, so there's lots of things to say about this. Like I said, it's for the people funding it, it literally is pick your favorite evil person, pick your favorite technocrat, and they've probably donated to the ballroom. It's more bribery, it's more corruption, and like I said, the conservative argument is, well, it's not being paid for by taxpayers. Okay, but it is being paid for by people that are going to be seeking favors from our president. That's, I think, the real problem. And on top of that, the just complete loss of history and access to the White House. You know, they stopped the tours of the East Wing. Like I said, that's the only part that was accessible to the public. They stopped the tours. Don't know when they'll come back. And if tours do come back, what are they going to do? They're going to tour the 90,000 square foot ballroom, which feasibly should just be a big empty room. Like, I don't know. And the other concerning part about this is obviously that people are thinking he's building a ballroom. It's not going to be done until he's, you know, heading out of office. And that looks indicative of him not leaving office. However, and I wasn't planning on talking about this, so we're just going to touch on it. His health does seem to be slipping. He is like literally taking naps during cabinet meetings. His hands are still bruised. He's like, I don't know. So I don't know where I fall on that, because yes, you can make the argument that he's making this ballroom because he doesn't plan to leave office, but he is so clearly not well and not 100% himself that it's almost silly to say like he plans to, you know, stick around for another 4 years or run for another term, because he is ailing, to be quite frank. Moving on to Trump's pardons. He has been on a roll. He's pardoned so many freaking people that it's hard to keep track of. But in the last month, he pardoned CZ, whose real name is Changpeng Zhao, who was the founder and former CEO of the crypto exchange Binance, which has coincidentally made Donald Trump and his family millions of dollars, because that is the platform that they are hosting their Bitcoins and their, I need to get up to date on the crypto, but remember when they made like Melania coin and Trump coin? That was all hosted by Binance, which CZ is or was the CEO of. He was arrested for doing bad things and Trump pardoned him, and there was a whole bunch of outrage about it because he was so clearly guilty of the things that he was accused of, and on top of that, again, made the Trumps millions and millions of dollars. Now, the weirdest part about that, like that all that outrage is fine and completely acceptable, but the weirdest part is that reporters obviously had questions and would be like, Trump, like, why did you pardon this guy? And he he does this all the time where he'll say, like, they told me he was a good guy. Like, they told me that, like, who's they? The mouse in your pocket? Like, okay. They told him that he was a good guy, whatever. Then in a 60 Minutes interview, which, keep in mind, is still supposedly a good network and a good institution, when asked about it, Trump goes, "Are you ready? Are you ready? I know nothing about it." What? That's concerning. If you as president do not know the people you're pardoning, that's a problem. Like, point blank, that is a problem. And I struggle, I guess, to understand, nobody really knows, like, what is going on behind closed doors. My immediate thought is that there are all these people, such as Trump's kids that are, in his first term, they were members of the White House in some certain capacity. Now they're out in the world, they're doing these backroom things, and then, going to the official White House people and being like, hey, there's this guy, CZ. He's a good guy, like, pardon him. And then it appears on Trump's desk and he doesn't get, like, the lowdown. And this has always been, I think I've talked about it in previous solo episodes, where Trump is it just appears as though his administration is feeding him the smallest bits and pieces of news that look positive. Like, I think back to that time, and this was, like, at the beginning of his presidency, where Stephen Miller was like, the court decided, like, fully with you. And in reality, the court had sided completely against him. Like, they're not feeding him correct information. And so when it comes to the pardons, it makes me think that he's just being fed, the sheet to sign to say, like, CZ pardoned, and not getting, like, the full lowdown, which is so stupid and counterproductive, because then he gets in front of cameras and he's asked about it and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry, that's way more concerning. Then we had just this past week, his pardon of the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez. Now, this man was accused and convicted of smuggling a whole bunch of drugs into the United States. Incredibly accused, I should add. This is interesting when you take into account, which we will talk about later, the boat strikes off the coast of Venezuela for reportedly, allegedly smuggling drugs in. And he's creating this whole campaign against, like, we need to get the drug smugglers, like, we need to stop the flow of drugs into the United States. Okay, fine, but you're pardoning a guy that has certifiably, verifiably brought in millions of dollars worth of drugs into the United States. It doesn't make sense. And this is so new, so there's not a whole lot of, like, investigative journalism into this, but I'm eager to see the investigative reporting that comes out of this, because there has to be some shady, like, backroom stuff going on. Like, that, again, taking into account the mission, air quotes, that we're doing off the coast of Venezuela in the name of, eradicating drug smuggling and drug trafficking, to then pardon a guy that is a known drug trafficker makes no sense. It reeks of corruption, is all I have to say. Now, let's talk about the boat strikes that are going on off the coast of Venezuela. This has been going on since September 2nd. I can't recall if I spoke about this in another episode, but since September, these strikes have been ramping up. There's been I think I read somewhere, like 100 people killed in these strikes. It is all in the name of, like I said, eradicating drug trafficking. Now, this doesn't make sense because our precursor chemicals for things like fentanyl come from China and they get moved up through Mexico. So Venezuela is not even the right country. Most people are on the same page that this is because Venezuela has oil that the United States wants, and it's moving closer and closer to some sort of ground invasion or, dropping bombs on land in Venezuela. So that's kind of where this is headed. But on the boat strikes specifically, the DOD, that's another thing. They changed the name to Department of War. No, thank you. DOD, it is. The DOD has been bombing these vessels and then releasing these, like, snuff videos of them literally bombing the vessels and putting them on Twitter and being like, got him. What? Why are we posting our videos of murder? Like, I just, like, I don't even have words for it. Like, it's insane. And then they'll announce, like, we've taken down another vessel, da-da-da. And anybody that has anything to say about it, for example, Sabrina Carpenter, she was talking about immigration, but they used one of her songs and she said this is vile and disgusting in a response to them on Twitter. And they were like, Sabrina Carpenter protects pedophiles and criminals. And it's the same response with these boat strikes. So, like, if you are saying, like, hey, this is murder, like, it's giving war crime, you immediately are in favor of drugs and drug smugglers and criminals. Like, that's not how that works. I am anti-boat strike and murdering people when you don't have evidence. But at the same time, I also would like drugs not coming into this country. So hard to square that circle. So this has all been heating up since these attacks kind of started in September. And at the time, Republicans remained pretty quiet about everything. And again, the response to anybody that disagreed was just like, well, you support drug trafficking. Or better yet, there were some Republican, just everyday people being like, well, what about Obama's drone strikes? So that's a war crime? Yes. They're both war crimes. I don't know what to tell you. Anyways, all of this has come to a head now. These strikes have been continuing to happen, like literally probably once a week since September. But this all came to a head because it came out due to a Washington Post article that came out saying that Hegseth ordered on the first Caribbean boat strike, which was September 2nd, Hegseth ordered a second strike saying, quote, kill them all. Now, I don't really know where I want to like start with unpacking this. In maritime law and war in general, if somebody is surrendering to you, you don't kill them. If they are a criminal, you go and grab them and you send them back to their country for prosecution, or you bring them to your country for prosecution. If they're surrendering, you save them. You don't kill them. Now, as time has gone on, that article from the Washington Post came out on November 28th, the day after Thanksgiving. And since then, given that what I just said is like kind of how you're supposed to handle people that are surrendering, Republicans have started to turn against Hegseth on the Armed Services Committee, saying, it's not right. And more information has started to come out. Hegseth then pivoted and was like, I like can't even say it with a straight face. Hegseth then pivoted and was like, so I left the room. I did the first strike and I left the room. The other thing that really pissed me off about what he said was he used the phrase fog of war. And what he said was, I saw the first strike go down and there was smoke and fire and, it was the fog of war, which is not really what that phrase means. Like, it seems like he was taking it literally. Like the smoke and flames coming from the boat that he just bombed was making him unable to see if there were survivors, which I think is true. But he used the phrase incorrectly because fog of war really refers to, like, more in general combat fighting and how, you are always going in with uncertain information and, things aren't always clear. But then if that's his reason, why would he not wait for the fog of war, air quotes, to clear so he could see whatever? Anyways, so he said he couldn't see anything because of the fog of war. Talk your shit, King. And then he left the room to go to his next meeting because he's just so busy. And then it was the general that called the order for the second strike. That is Hegseth's story now. That's what he's going with. Final answer. Then, and I believe this was yesterday, so December 5th, lawmakers got to see the full video. And what they saw was, after the first strike goes down, there were 11 people on board. First strike happens, and there's 2 people clinging to remnants of the ship. Like, the ship does not exist anymore. It was literally bombed. The ship is not there. These people are clinging to parts of the ship. And so clearly, like, you can't do anything in that situation. If you have just been bombed and you have survived and you are clinging to parts of your ship to stay afloat, what can you do? Now, the Trump administration is saying that these people were climbing back to the, again, splinters of their ship so that they could continue to deliver the drugs. And lest we forget, this ship was not headed towards the United States. It apparently had started to turn around as it realized it was being bombed. I just can't. So Trump administration story is these people were climbing back onto the ship. Again, it's pieces of a ship. There's nothing to climb back onto in order to call more, quote, narco terrorists for help and continue to deliver the drugs. So that's their excuse. And I think that is their excuse because if they were getting back onto the boat and firing at the planes that were bombing them or firing at U.S. soldiers, that would be considered an act of aggression and then give them the ability to do the second strike and make it legal. I think it takes any person with 3 brain cells to look at the situation and go, oh, there's no boat. There's no way for them to, get out of the water to take something back to shore. There's no way that they could have been calling for more help and using a gun or whatever it may be. Their excuses at this point are just so laughable. Regardless, in the wake of all of this, congressional and public pressure is now mounting. Committees in both the House and Senate have launched bipartisan investigations demanding full transparency over this. As I said, they watched the video, I think, on Friday. And they're also trying to look at chain of command records to figure out, again, who gave the strike. Washington Post reports that it was Pete Hegseth that said, kill them all. But Pete is now saying it was the general in charge of it that's decided to do the second strike because Pete Hegseth had to take a shit and go to the bathroom. Like, whatever. People are looking into it. And I know, just on to why this matters, I understand that the Republican response is so, if we don't kill these people, that's getting drugs into this country. I take issue with that because there's no evidence that these are drug boats, and not to mention when Trump is calling these people narco-terrorists, despite there being no evidence that there's drugs on the boat. If anything, I just think about this critically for a second. The boat strike in September had 11 people on the boat. Do you know what you need to do when you are a narco-terrorist? You want the least amount of people on the boat and the most amount of drugs. More than likely, that boat was smuggling humans to, whether it may have been to the US or some other country. Who knows? Who knows? But if you were actually smuggling drugs, you want the most amount of drugs on the boat and the least amount of human people on there. That is not what that boat was. You don't need 11 people on the drug smuggling boat. I'm sorry. And what drug smuggler is going to allow 9 extra people on when he could have had a whole bunch of extra kilograms of cocaine on the boat? That's issue number 1. So I don't think even to begin with that the Trump administration is being honest about, the evidence that these boats have drugs on them. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is the murdering of people, and then the minute somebody has a criticism about it being like, oh, so you support drug trafficking. It's, again, they don't have nuance. There's no nuance there. Issue number 3, of course, is when all eyes are on this and it comes out that they were shooting people or bombing people that appeared as though they were trying to surrender and didn't have any means for help or any means to harm the American planes and soldiers that were nearby. It's a problem because you're blurring the rules of war. Again, if somebody is surrendering, you do not fire upon them. You take them to your country, you take them to their country to be prosecuted and jailed. The other thing that came out of this, I don't know if this was this boat strike or, no, this had to be another one. There was one boat strike where they blew it up and then there were survivors and then they just let them go. Again, if your whole mission is we want to stop drugs from coming into the United States, perfect. Love it. But then you are blowing up the drug boat and you have survivors of the drug boat. Instead of killing these ones, they went and got them and then were like, all right, hope you guys have fun. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks when we blow your boat up again. What? If there was any evidence that these people were actually drug traffickers, would they not be prosecuting them? There are just so many issues and holes in all of this, and it makes no sense. It is so obviously all for Venezuela's oil, in my humble opinion. And Trump, again, will not comment on what the long-term plan and goal is with this. But Pete Hegseth will continue to release his snuff films. He's also in hot water right now, and we will see. We will see what happens. Moving on to Election Day. That was a very exciting day for me. Election Day was on November 4th of 2025. There were elections in New Jersey, in New York City, that is, Virginia, Georgia, California with Prop 50, and Democrats wiped the floor with Republicans. The biggest shock of that night was 2 Democrats in Georgia winning seats on the state's 5-person public utility regulator, earning 60% of the votes. And that's a huge deal because it is the first time that Democrats have won a non-federal statewide office there since 2006. In places like New Jersey and Virginia, everything swung to the left in pretty big margins. On top of that, in New York City elected Zohran Mamdani as the mayor, which is very exciting. And again, not talking about this later on, but Trump and Mamdani meeting, and it's very exciting. I'm excited to see what comes out of New York. I hope he does well, because if he doesn't, Republicans will use him as this talking point and sticking point for literally everything. There was also a big win in Pennsylvania where people were deciding on whether to keep the more liberal judges in their seats. They voted yes on that. And of course, we have Prop 50 in California, which passed. But overall, these signs are very good for what is to come in 2026 in the midterms. And on top of that, just this past week on December 2nd, there was the election in Tennessee's 7th district between Afton Ben and something Epps, whatever that guy's name is. Doesn't matter to me. But it was a Trump plus 22 district in 2024. Afton, the Democrat, was able to close that gap to single digits. I think she lost by 8 or maybe 9 points. So that is going from a Trump plus 22 to a just Republican plus 9, which is crazy. Even in an off-cycle election where Democrats are more likely to be the voters, like, that is an insane closing of the gap. And she fought hard. And what made me laugh was that Mike Johnson was like the closer from the Republican Party who came and stumped for Epps on the last day. Like, who's getting up to vote for Mike Johnson? Like, whatever. Things look good, in my humble opinion, for Democrats to, make big moves in 2026. And I'm very hopeful. But back to the redistricting. So California had Prop 50 on the ballot. It passed. Gavin Newsom had at one point a line in that legislation that said, like, this will only go into effect if Texas's goes into effect. They removed that. Prop 50 passes. Immediately, there's a lawsuit by some sort of Republicans, which is insane to me because people voted for it. That's called democracy, babes. Anyways, then the Texas map got shot down by a court, and then everybody was like, oh my god, go Gavin Newsom for taking that line out, because now Dems are up 5. Then this past week, the Supreme Court ruled that Texas can actually keep its map, which is crazy. But the good thing is that while there are challenges going on to California's map, most of the justices in their decision said that it is very clear that California's map is drawn on partisan lines. The court has previously ruled that redistricting based on partisan lines is not illegal, which makes California's map completely okay. The issue with Texas's map is that it was gerrymandered and drawn up based on race, which is not allowed by law. Elena Kagan had a pretty good dissent on this. That was a pretty good read. If you have the time, I would read at least the first few pages of it. It was a pretty scathing dissent, and she really dug into her Republican colleagues for, I don't want to say politicizing the court, but more being so willing to just roll over and say, yep, whatever they say goes. Like, there were literally messages saying that this was done based on race, and they upheld it. Like, that's insane. Let's move on to something a little bit more happy. Jack Schlossberg, who is JFK's grandson, has thrown his hat into the ring for New York's 12th congressional district. Now, very exciting. A new generation of Kennedys is, come into play. And on top of that, his sister, Tatiana, has just announced that she has terminal cancer, which is so heartbreaking and sad. And if you haven't read her article that she released, I do recommend you go read it. It was a real tearjerker. And she addresses, Secretary of Health Kennedy and just the harm that he's caused, especially, in the world she's living in and cancer treatment. And Jack seems willing to stand up and fight. And I'm very excited to see where he goes with this. He does have such an interesting social media presence, which is how I started following him in the first place. But the other funny thing is that, so Jack throws his hat into the ring and says, I'm running. And then George Conway, who is Claudia Conway, if you're Gen Z, it's her father, and Kellyanne Conway, as in the Trump aide who got COVID at the Amy Coney Barrett inauguration bash, her ex-husband, who is a former conservative lawyer turned Trump antagonist, hasn't officially announced his run, but he is apparently deeply considering it, which is like almost felt like a reaction to Jack Schlossberg, but like whatever. But again, very excited about what's to come in that race. I'm eager to see if Jack's able to pull it off. It's a very crowded primary, much like, Illinois' 9th, a solid Democratic district. So it's, whoever wins the primary is basically guaranteed to win the general. And on top of that, Schlossberg just generally represents this rise in younger people running for office and kind of breaking that one incumbent stranglehold, but also the establishment kind of rule. I haven't seen anything about him taking corporate money. You guys know that that's an issue that's pretty important to me, but it should be good. It's most of these young candidates that are running care so deeply about these places that they're running in, and a lot of them are not taking corporate money, which is, again, very, very inspiring. Okay, a couple more stories for you guys. First up, we have the National Guard shooting that happened in DC right around Thanksgiving. There were 2 National Guards members shot. The woman was pronounced dead on the day after it happened. Trump has now tried to extend the deployment in DC, and he said that he's sending more National Guard people to other places. ICE has now landed in Minneapolis, and whatever. There's lots of opinions swirling about, whether this was a false flag thing or a conspiracy, whatever you want to say about it. Conspiracy or not, this seems like, to Trump, like this was the best case scenario. National Guard members get shot. He says they're there to protect citizens and keep crime rates low. Therefore, he has the justification to say, oh, I need to send more. I need to keep them there. This couldn't have gone more perfectly for Trump. And on top of that, the shooter was working with the CIA in Afghanistan and was reportedly vetted time and time again, and now went out and shot 2 Guards members. So now he has the perfect storm of anti-immigration plus wanting to keep National Guard members in these cities. So again, maybe it's a conspiracy, maybe it's not, maybe, whatever you want to say about it, but this has created the literal perfect opportunity for Trump to justify what he is doing in these cities. And what he's doing in these cities is not right. It's truly dystopian to have armed guards in your city, period. Especially when crime rates are going down. That is all I have to say. Like, it really was the, again, perfect opportunity, perfect storm for Trump to justify this stuff, and that makes me really upset and angry. But yeah, I mean, there hasn't really been much of an update as to where Trump is planning to send the National Guard to next. That is, I guess, still up in the air. And we will see what happens. One last story. It's time to shit on the Democrats. So as everybody knows, there was a government shutdown through most of the month of October. The shutdown ended in early November. It was the longest shutdown in history. So Trump now has spot number 1 and spot number 2 from his first term, which is freaking nuts. Shutdown ended because Democrats capitulated. This made a lot of people angry, and a lot of people that are running for Senate have come out and said, if it were me, I wouldn't vote for it, as kind of their message for how they're different. And, I get it. Most of the people that voted yes are people that do not have to worry about re-election. My own Senator Dick Durbin was one of the people that voted for it. I was very frustrated with that, mostly because, and I can only speak for, my bubble, but there were a lot of people I knew that were trying to call him. First of all, his phones were not connected, which is embarrassing. You were too scared to confront your constituents. That's embarrassing. His phones were not connected. And on top of that, if your constituents, keep in mind, in this ideal world, the way it is supposed to work is that our elected officials are meant to represent us, meant to listen to us and what we would like them to do. And in this situation where Dick Durbin is getting calls from his constituents saying, do not vote for this, and then he turns around and votes for it, that is a direct betrayal. I was talking to some people I know about it, and I was like, he has just completely ruined his legacy. His legacy should have been on the DREAM Act. That was one of his passion projects, and one of the most notable things that he did in his career was fighting for immigration. And now he has completely soiled it, and will now forever be known as the guy that capitulated during the shutdown. And I think the craziest part about the capitulation is that the people that had the most to lose are the Democrats that are in vulnerable seats. So, for example, that includes John Ossoff in Georgia. And he was like, no, keep going. He thought, and I also think, that Democrats had the leg up and were winning this fight. And I think they were. It was, and I think like the straw that broke the camel's back on this was the threatening to not release SNAP benefits. And what I will say to that is that over that weekend where it was announced that, oh, there's not going to be SNAP benefits paid out on November 1st, I saw so much community. There were, in my area, I think 4 food drives. I went to one over that weekend, and I've never seen so much food in my life. It was insane. The pantry that I got dropped off to was completely full. And I don't say that to say, like, this could have gone on for another 30 days, but at least for the next couple weeks, seeing the amount of just outpouring and support and love that I was seeing, I'm hard-pressed to think that people wouldn't be able to push through for at least another week. Maybe that sounds insensitive, but people were so willing to help their communities and so willing to jump in where the government wasn't going to. And I'm not sure, there hasn't been much reporting on, what the deal was, who approached who and, what that was all about. It seems like it was some sort of backroom thing that is never going to see the light of day, but it's embarrassing. The Democrats that voted for it should be embarrassed. And, it also has started to turn into a question of leadership. Like, in terms of the Senate, like, Chuck Schumer seems to not really have a grip on his party if people are sneaking around and creating backroom deals with Republicans. So there has been a lot of people, and it's also become a talking point of, like, who are you, for candidates at least, will you support Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries should you win? Like, will you vote for them to be the leaders in the House and Senate? And it's been, again, another telltale sign of where people fall, especially for incumbents, where the incumbents are more likely to say it, where they'll be like, oh, I don't know, or they'll just say yes. And there's a lot of people running that are like, no, like, we need new leadership. And I think both sides have some merit. I think there is a issue with leadership in the House and Senate, but I do think in the Senate, at least, that Chuck Schumer is just too old and he needs to do what Nancy Pelosi did and just pass the baton and be able to advise for a couple years before he retires. I think it's irresponsible for him to continue to be the party leader. And in terms of the House, Jeffries is, one, not a very good communicator, and two, it really rubs me the wrong way the way he and Chuck Schumer showed up to that meeting with Trump at the beginning of the shutdown and just kind of sat there when Trump put out the Trump 2028 hats. Like, if he really was the fighter that he says he is, he would have walked out of that meeting and said, get that shit off the desk or I'm not coming back. Like, it's tough. I'm not really sure where I stand on this right now. I completely understand candidates that are running saying, oh no, I'm not voting for Jeffries. Like, we need a new, sense of leadership. And I get it. Like, that's a lot of the candidates that are running are change candidates. Like, they are candidates that want to get in there and, knock some stuff over and, create new systems and do bold strokes. That is what a lot of these candidates want that would be freshmen in, the Senate or in Congress. So I understand them not wanting to vote for Jeffries. But on the other hand, I do understand the incumbents, wanting to keep their good standing. Like, which just makes me sound like a corporate shill. So, you know what? I don't know. I quit. We'll see where the cookie crumbles. I'm sure I'll get a more solidified opinion on this at a later date. But right now, I believe that there is a lack of good leadership in the House and Senate, especially given that people are just able to break and, nobody really says anything about it. Like, that's a little bit crazy to me, but we will see where the cookie crumbles. That is kind of all that I have for you guys. This is already a longer solo episode than I normally do. There were a couple more things that had just come up in the last week. Costco is suing the Trump administration to challenge the tariff policies and claiming that they are unfairly penalizing consumers and small businesses. And if it is successful, it'll force the Trump administration to reevaluate its tariffs. The other thing is the Department of Education, which I swear to God they closed a few months ago. But the Department of Education has redefined what qualifies as a, quote, professional degree, which is going to limit student loan access for so many people. The big issue with this is that so many of the degrees that they now say are not professional degrees are female and immigrant dominated fields, such as nursing and social work and things like that. And effectively what it does is for non-professional degrees, or degrees that are considered non-professional, which now includes things like social work and nursing and probably whatever degree it takes to become a psychologist, the amount of loans is smaller than what you would be able to take out for a quote-unquote professional degree, thereby, limiting access to those degrees. If you are a person with not a lot of money and you have dreams of being a social worker, you're not going to be able to do that now because you can't get enough loans, and you're going to have to take private loans that have predatory, interest rates on them. Like, it's all cyclical, and it's shameful that it is targeting female dominated fields. But that is all that I have. Next week we will be having a social media star on named Hot Takes. If you are on TikTok, I'm sure you've seen a couple of his videos pop up. And he had a video that went viral that showed up on my For You page that I was like, wait, I need to have him. So I sent him a DM and we had a really great conversation. And I'm hoping to bring him back on in like the springtime. And yeah, so that's what we got going on next week. And then we'll have another guest at the end of December who is a social justice photographer based out of Chicago. His name is Adriano Kalin. And that'll be the end of the year, and then we'll launch into January with more candidates. And yeah, I am also going to be launching my Substack at the beginning of next year, and it's going to be mostly newsletter based once a month. Still kind of figuring out what I want to write about. I always feel like I do these solo episodes and then I finish and I post them and I'm like, wait, I have more to say. But this, should be a good thing, I think, to expand what Current Affairs Unfiltered is. And the Substack will be not called Current Affairs Unfiltered. It'll be called She Knows the Score. So that should be fun. And yeah, and we're coming up in the new year. We'll be close to 1 year of Current Affairs Unfiltered, which is just insane. I never could have imagined what this podcast has become. It's been such a learning experience, and I feel like I'm a better person because of it. I know that's silly to say, but it's truly been a journey, and I appreciate every single one of you that tunes in and listens and, sends me emails and follows me on Instagram. It's been great. And I'm still looking forward to going into year 2 doing this and expanding what is in the Current Affairs Unfiltered universe. And we'll see what happens. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and remember to send a hate tweet to Pete Hegseth today. I will see you guys next week.